Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Bookworm Banter. We are here to review a book called The Silent Patient, one of my more favorite books that I've read recently here. I hope you went out and bought this book because it is a really good book, and I didn't even realize it is a #1 New York Times bestseller. Granted, I understand why after reading this book. If you haven't read it, then go ahead and go get that book, guys. It's really good. It's definitely worth a read. And I know the last book that I reviewed, Black Cake, I was a little less likely to recommend, but this book I highly recommend. So you guys go out there. If you haven't bought the book yet, go ahead and buy it. Okay, so we're going to start off with kind of a dry review. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it. I'm going to give you my recommendation of a score 1 through 10 for this book, and I would give this book like a 9. It was so good, and the only reason why I don't give it like a full 10 is because I didn't enjoy the ending at all whatsoever. Terrible ending. I hated the ending. That was the only thing I didn't like about the book. Like the last 3 pages of the book, I was like, what? Wait, not even the last 3 pages. The last 3 pages were probably the best. It's probably like the last 5 paragraphs. I'm like, what the hell is going on? I didn't understand why anybody would end a book like the way that it did. But overall, this book was really good. It had me on the edge of my seat. It is a definite page turner and by far one of my more favorite genres of books. I more so would classify it as a thriller, but also a mystery, because there's a lot of questioning going on within the book, a lot of guessing. There are several different characters that we dive into to kind of get an explanation of what happened with the main character, Alicia, kind of give backstory to her life and see what led up to the events of her shooting her husband 5 times in the face. So there are like a lot of people that they talk about throughout the book that kind of give insight to where things were going wrong, the events leading up to that, and the state of mind that she was in prior to the killing her husband. So for me, there was like a lot of mystery, a lot of page turning, a lot of like, oh my God, did he do it? Oh my God, how did he get involved? Or how did she get involved? What do they know? And why are we getting these little tidbits of things that we might not need? It was a lot of misdirection, in my opinion. So if you haven't read the book yet and you just kind of wanted to get like an idea of what the book is about, what a score would be for the book, would I recommend? I would highly recommend. The book is really good. I give it a 9 out of 10, slight the ending. And yeah, if you're really into like thriller mysteries, then this is a really good book to go for, because there were so many unexpected twists and turns throughout this book that I loved it. So at this point, we're going to get real deep into the review. So if you haven't read it, go out, buy it, come back, listen to this podcast when you finished it, and then you can leave some comments and we can talk about it, or you can see my opinion of what I thought of the book after you read it. So let's get to it. So first off, brief description, just going over what happened in the book again. Alicia Berenson, she's the main character. She's an artist who kills her husband unexpectedly, shoots him in the face 5 times, and then never speaks again. So for her storyline, it's very interesting because the book it starts out not really more so based around her, but based around the psychotherapist Theo Faber, who is working at a different facility and sees there is an opening at the facility that Felicia Berenson is being held at for employment. So he applies and he's like really eager to get in there and talk to her. And it comes off as though he thinks that Alicia is just such this mystery that he wants to solve and a case that he wants to crack. And he thinks that he's the only therapist that can reach her and get her to talk. So that's kind of how the book starts out, with him applying to this job and essentially receiving the job, and his first mission is to become the therapist that Alicia is seeing. So throughout the first pages, the first couple of chapters, you get introduced to a few new characters. You get introduced to, I don't know if I'm saying this name right because I'm assuming Greek, but Diomedes, and he is the head therapist over all of the therapists that work at the facility Alicia is at. And then Christian is a co-therapist, and there was another female therapist who is in there as well. I didn't even bother writing her name down because to me she kind of played more of an irrelevant role. She was just like an extra, in my opinion. She didn't really do anything too crazy except side with Theo for an unexplained reason, number of occasions. So I don't even remember her name, but let's see. Yeah, so Christian starts out really hating Theo. I guess they had worked together before, so they have some kind of turmoil there, and they kind of go back and forth because Christian is currently the one overseeing Alicia's care, and she's on all these doped up medications that are making her really like loopy, and Theo wants to take her off of them so he can be able to talk to her. And that's understandable. Obviously you can't speak to anybody about like what's going on in their lives if they're like too loopy to have conversation. So after some back and forth, Diomedes lets Theo take over Alicia's care. He gets her off the meds, and they meet again, and she just lunges at him like unexplained. And I'm like, okay, Alicia's crazy. Like, she's for real crazy. She didn't just kill her husband. She's just has gone insane because she's unprovoked and just attacks the therapist, Theo. I thought that was pretty crazy. And as he kind of delves more into that, then we get more also into Theo's character, about who he is and what's going on with his life. He is married to a woman named Kathy, and Kathy is a low down dirty dog, y'all. Reading this book, I want to say it's at least within like the first 3 or 4 chapters of the book that we learn that Kathy is a cheating hoe. She a cheating hoe. And the way that Theo finds out about this, one, is insane. It is crazy that she would just, it's almost like she want to be caught because she just leaves her, I think it's her laptop. I'm pretty sure it's her laptop, not her cell phone. She leaves her laptop out on the table, slightly open, and she's gone out for the evening. So Theo's sitting at home by himself. He's smoking a little weed. He's getting a little high. And he only does it when Kathy's not there because she disapproves of it. So he's by himself. He's smoking weed. He's getting high. And he sees that Kathy has left her laptop open. So, you know, him being an unstable person that he is, because you learned that about Theo, that he's unstable. But him being the unstable person that he is, he decides to go in and look at her stuff. And he sees some emails back and forth between Kathy and some other guy talking about, I can't wait to see you. Let me see where it's at. Okay, so it's clearly not chapters 3 or 4. Oh, that's interesting because, okay, so this book, I guess, is in parts. So, I forgot that. Because, y'all, I want to read these emails, like, straight up. Okay, here we go. Okay, so let's see. It is her laptop. This is page 87. If you guys are following along, I found it. It is, let me see. It's in chapter 6 of part 2, I think. Okay, so this is how he finds out that his wife is cheating on him. Then I located it, peeking out from behind Kathy's open laptop on the coffee table. I reached for it, but was so stoned I knocked over the laptop. I propped the laptop up again and the screen came to life. It was logged into her email account. For some reason, I kept staring at it. I was transfixed. Her inbox stared at me like a gaping hole. I couldn't look away. All kinds of things jumped out before I knew what I was reading. Words such as sexy, and in the email headings, and repeated emails from Bad Boy 22. If only I'd stopped there. If only I'd got up and walk away, but I didn't. I clicked on the most recent email and opened it. Okay, here come the juicy, y'all. Tree, Little Miss Bang Bang. Okay. From Catarama 1 to Bad Boy 22. I'm on the bus, so horny for you. I can smell you on me. I feel like a slut. Reply. You are a slut, LOL. See you later after rehearsal. Reply. Okay, we'll see what time I can get away. I'll text you. Reply. Okay, 8:39. I pulled the laptop from the table. This is now Theo talking again. I pulled the laptop from the table. I sat with it on my lap, staring at it. I don't know how long I sat like that. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, maybe longer. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. I tried to process what I had just seen, but I was still so stoned. I wasn't sure what I had seen. Was it real or some kind of misunderstanding? Some joke I wasn't getting because I was so high? I forced myself to read another email. And another. I ended up going through all Kathy's emails to Bad Boy 22. Some were sexual, obscene even. Others were long, more confessional, emotional, and she sounded drunk. Perhaps they were written late at night after I had gone to bed. I pictured myself in the bedrooms asleep while Kathy was out there, writing intimate messages to the stranger. The stranger she was banging. Time caught up with itself with a jolt. Suddenly I was no longer stoned. I was horribly, painfully sober. There was a wrenching pain in my stomach. I threw aside the laptop. I ran into the bathroom. I fell to my knees in front of the toilet and threw up. So, first and foremost, that was probably my most shocking moment of the book. When I saw that, I was like, no, because so prior to this, Kathy and Theo, they go out with a group of friends, and she makes it seem like they're this lovey-dovey couple, just kind of stuff. And really, when you get to the meat and potatoes of it, like she just out here spreading eagle for a margarita. One margarita, she gonna spread her legs. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, that really shocked me. Shocked me to the core, and the fact that Theo so calmly just sat there and read these emails and just kept reading and going through, and then questioning himself, is this real? Am I that high that I'm imagining that my wife is cheating on me? What kind of weed are you smoking? In any reality, you would be so high as to imagine such an unfathomable thing. You know what I'm saying? So that to me was just crazy. That whole page 87 to whatever, when did I stop? Page 87 to 89, 2 pages of the book completely changed the trajectory of the book for me. When I realized how, this was a big question for me, and I don't know what it's like for everybody else. And, I kind of thought to myself, sidetrack from the book, but Theo is an obviously very disturbed individual. He has explained throughout the book that he had issues with loving himself, issues with confidence. He attempted to kill himself one time. He has family issues, and just mentally he's not well put together. And he started going to therapy himself as a young adult. He started going to therapy, which is great for him. Mentally getting yourself to a better place. And that event of him going to therapy and getting the help that he needed kind of lit a spark to him wanting to be a therapist himself. But for me, yes, no matter who you are, you're going to have some type of turmoil that you are going through. And I think that everyone can benefit from having a therapist and going through therapy. However, him being so disturbed and who he is, and the perspectives that he has, I don't really understand how he could provide therapy for anybody. I mean, and that really comes into a question of, can the mentally unsound be a good reflecting mirror to a person who is also mentally unsound? Like, can two broke legs can't walk. So would he be able to help others who are suffering from mental issues or things like that when he himself doesn't seem very stable? And even throughout the book, he says like, oh, I stopped going to therapy because I was in a better place and I found the love of my life. But he hinged all of his happiness and all of his stability on this one woman, Kathy. And as a therapist, you should be able to recognize that you are in a very codependent relationship and that your happiness cannot solely depend, your mental stability cannot solely depend on one person being present and keeping you in that space, because that's not stability. God forbid anything happen to that person, let alone you see them having emails with other people about other people. He's just mentally unstable. You know what I'm saying? Like, to go further into the book about what's going on with Theo, he laid in a bush while hearing his wife have sex with her lover and just let it happen. Lord, take the wheel, because it wouldn't be me. It just would not. It wouldn't be me even reading those emails, like how he just calmly went about his life, went about his day, and just kept seeing her and acting like, oh, well, I can't lose her. And so I'm just going to keep going and pretend like I never see this. And maybe it wasn't even real, like just doubting the whole thing the entire time, so much so that it got to a point of doubt that he started stalking his own wife, and then following her into some bushes and hearing or witnessing her in sexual relationships with this other man, and then following that man to his home. Y'all, I'm like, Theo is insane. He is insane. And even when he went to see his old therapist, she's like, bro, what are you doing? Like, Kathy is clearly not the one. Y'all are clearly in an unhappy marriage. She is not good for you, and this isn't good for you. What you're doing, trying to accept this space that you guys are in, like, there is no such thing. You need to confront this situation head on, which he should have did well before he even went to see that therapist. But he needed to confront that situation head on. So yeah, that whole situation, page 87, really spiraled Theo's character for me. At first, he was kind of seeming like this very concerned and very proactive character trying to get to the bottom of Alicia, and just like myself, loving a good mystery, liking a good challenge. And so he saw that in a way as from an admirer of her art and her storyline as a way to kind of get her to talk. He wanted the challenge of being the one that got her to talk. So Theo's character, out of all the characters, was probably the most dynamic character for me. I can't say that in this book I have a favorite character, because, guys, there are so many characters. I wrote just a few down, ones that were important throughout the story. Alicia, Gabriel, Theo. Gabriel is Alicia's husband. Diomedes, the therapist overseeing everyone. Max is Gabriel's brother, and he's important for a very good reason, which is another point that I want to step on as we're talking about this review. So Max, it turns out throughout the book you learn that he is obsessed with Alicia, that he loves her, and he on the sly is trying to get her to, do a little something extra when Gabriel's not looking. And he's being aggressive about it. Extremely aggressive. And that kind of plays into another review point that I made in the Black Cake review, is this is another book where a theme of a character is sexual assault. And the theme for that character is Max, and the victim to that sexual assault is Alicia, the woman, the main character of the book. So I thought it was just very interesting that this is like the second book that I reviewed that has a theme of sexual assault against women. And like I said, I know that it's happening, and I don't doubt that it isn't. And I'm hoping that every victim of sexual assault speaks up. From personal experience, it's just not prevalent. So that's just very scary and interesting that it's such a common theme within the literature that I'm reading. However, Max, super in love with her, he becomes a suspect of Alicia or Max or Gabriel's murder, and a reason why Alicia's not speaking. So when I was first reading this, y'all, I thought to myself that Max had for sure did it. Like, he had been stalking Alicia, and he came in, murdered him, and she, from trauma of the situation, just decided to stop speaking. So there were so many things that throughout the book I was like, oh, he did it. Oh, they did it. Like, they're really giving you a lot to go on. They're really giving you a lot to go on. Okay, so the next person that I wrote down, Jean Felix. He is the art gallery dealer or owner. He deals with all of Alicia's art. He seems, how she describes, he seems like very needy and a friend that is no longer necessary for her life, and one that she tried to cut out. And so much of her art brought him large financial benefits. So when she told him that she no longer wanted him to be her art dealer, I thought that could have been enough reason for him to do something to kind of screw Alicia and hurt Gabriel in the same sense, because she, wrote in her diary that he was always very jealous of Gabriel and just like being very suspicious of him, which we now know why, but yeah, just very suspicious of him. So Jean Felix, he was another important character. Christian, my man Christian, he turns out to be an old therapist of Alicia, one that she saw before Gabriel was murdered, and a therapist that Gabriel suggested. A very interesting twist and plot turn on his character, because for me, him and the other therapist whose name I saw, Indira, they were kind of just like side stories to the story. We didn't really need them as therapists, especially Indira. I don't really feel like she did anything, but Christian we end up definitely needing, because he ties Alicia to previous mental health problems, along with being familiar with Gabriel, being familiar with Alicia's story, and also then at the end of the book being the scapegoat for Alicia's murder, or Alicia's attempted murder. So then Christian, Kathy, Theo's wife, Yuri, he's the psych nurse, and he plays a large part because he knows so much what's going on within that psych unit. He is really familiar with Elif, who is kind of a combating psych ward patient. She is vindictive and just mean, and she provokes Alicia a lot. So she ends up being quite a large part to the story and her conflict with Alicia, showcasing how violent Alicia can be. And then you have Paul, who's Alicia's cousin, who gives a lot of insight to what Alicia's family was like as a child and why she was so mentally unstable when her mother tried to kill her while killing herself. Her father blames her for her mother's death and then says he wishes she was dead instead. And then, her husband in the end kind of like, we'll go over what happened in the end after all of this. So Paul, he's a really important character to giving some insight to Alicia's mental stability problems and all that. So those were a few characters that I put that I thought were of importance, but there were a lot more. The neighbor Barbie, you have the secretary, Max's secretary, just like little bits and pieces here and there of other characters that served a small purpose throughout the story, but I thought those were the main characters. The Greek story, Alcestis, I thought was really interesting. I'm not super into Greek stories, so I had no idea about Alcestis. I thought that was really interesting. I don't know that it necessarily correlated very well for me, the actual story and then the reason why Alicia felt that was her story herself. I get she saying like she got killed twice by people that she loved and her husband did her dirty in the end. But yeah, I thought it was like it was a good tie-in, and I get why they did it, just very artistically. But maybe I just didn't read enough about the story to feel like it was really cohesive for me. But I did enjoy that part of the story. Okay, so to jump towards the end now, because I think that was the best part, obviously. So Theo gets Alicia's diary, and this is what really sparks the end of the story. Theo gets Alicia's diary, and in that diary, she talks about the days prior to the murder of her husband that she is accused of committing. And she mentions to her husband that she feels like she's being followed, that somebody's watching her. And he, Gabriel, completely dismisses her and says that she's going crazy again and insists that she goes back to therapy and just makes her out to be the villain in her own story. Which, one, unsupportive ass husband, excuse you, no thank you. And two, anybody I know or anybody I cared about, regardless of what kind of mental issues they had prior, which in my opinion, Alicia didn't have mental issues. She was depressed about things that happened in her past, and who isn't, you know? So the fact that they tried to make her to be crazy over that was like, okay. But either way, he was just like, you're going crazy again. You need to see a therapist. The fact that he didn't believe her was just kind of like, okay, you don't want to look into that at all. You don't want to show any concern for what your wife is telling you right now. So I thought that was really weird. But so to that effect, she decides that she is just not going to mention this person following her anymore because she doesn't want to be made or look crazy. So she kind of keeps it to herself and just keeps writing about it in her diary. And then we find out that Theo is the man who's following her. Theo, after following Gabriel home, from following his wife Kathy from having sex in the bushes with him, decides that he doesn't want to be the only person hurting. That isn't fair that he be the only person who knows the truth about their spouse. So in his mind, he's going to concoct a plan of telling Alicia about Gabriel and his tryst with his wife. He has a great idea of following Alicia around and waiting for his moment to tell the truth about Gabriel to Alicia. So we find out that Alicia is not crazy, that she is being followed by a person she doesn't know, and that person being Theo. When Alicia finally talks, it's kind of like, okay, knew that was going to happen. It's not a book if she doesn't talk, you know? And her talking to Theo, okay, knew that was going to happen. They're the two main characters. It's his life mission to get her to talk. No surprise there. So when she tells Theo that the story of her murdering, not really more so her murdering, but the story of what happened to Gabriel, she kind of explains it as someone broke into the house and murdered Gabriel, and she was left to take the fall, and that's why she no longer spoke. Theo feeling like, oh, why is she lying to me? I know she's lying to me. This is ridiculous. The story, he kind of spirals into this other plot and gets her to say that they'll talk the next day. But following that, she attempts to kill herself with a bottle. There's like a bottle of pills in her room, and she slips into a coma. They don't think that she's going to make it. So they're kind of all speculating like what happened, what's going on. Yuri says Elif has been dealing. And then that is when Theo decides to throw Christian under the bus and says, hey, you know, I don't know if anybody knows this, but Christian has had an inappropriate past with Alicia, being that he had previously been her therapist. And has anybody seen him today? And blah, blah. Side note, when they were all like, oh, where's Diomedes? And where did he go? I thought for sure Diomedes was like, oh, I'm killing her. Like, you didn't want to talk for me or something crazy. Like, because it just seemed weird that within that story at that time that he just disappeared all of a sudden. Nobody knows where he is. And then he just pops back up like, oh, here I am. So like I said, throughout the story, I thought like, oh, he did it. Oh, no, he definitely did it. Like, oh, he had something to do with it. But I really thought at that time that Diomedes was the one who killed Alicia or attempted to kill her or had something to do with her suicide attempt. Because he was nowhere to be found. And I don't really think at that time he had like a motive to do it, but it felt like in that time it made sense. So Theo throws Christian under the bus and tries to blame him for Alicia's attempted suicide. And so he thinks case is closed. He goes home to his wife, who is like all distraught because the love of her life, Gabriel, has just been murdered. So he goes home happy. He feels like he's winning, blah, 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 whoop, whoop, whoop. So segue into what really went down with Gabriel's murder. Theo masks himself and breaks into their home. And he holds Alicia hostage for several hours, waiting for Gabriel to get home. And once home, he ties Alicia up and tells her like, oh, if you make any sound, I'm going to kill Gabriel as soon as he walks in. So Gabriel comes home late, wink, wink. Who knows if he was actually working, but he was working late. And he comes home. Alicia doesn't say anything and fears that Theo is going to kill Gabriel. And once he gets in, Theo knocks him out and ties him up. And he ties them up back to back. So Gabriel and Alicia are back to back. And I think they're blindfolded. And Theo tells Alicia, your husband's been cheating on you with my wife. I think he tells him that no, I don't think he does. I can't remember exactly, but he tells Alicia that her husband's been cheating on her and that he is going to kill one of them. And someone has to choose which one it's going to be. And Alicia is all distraught. She's like, I can't do this. I can't choose. I love you, blah, blah, blah. And then Gabriel softly whispers I don't want to die. So essentially, he never says, yes, kill my wife. But by saying he's not the one who wants to die, it's kind of Alicia is going to be the one to die. If someone has to die here, I don't want it to be me. So at that point, Theo feels like he got what he wanted. And so he just lets Alicia go. He unties her and keeps Gabriel tied up, assuming that Alicia is going to let him go. But Alicia at this point is just she's so distraught and sad and confused and feeling like someone else important in her life has killed her again. She decides to go ahead and pick up the gun that Theo has been holding her with against her will and shoots Gabriel and kills him and murders him. And then she slits her own wrists and attempts to kill herself. So Theo, being the person that is the reason why Gabriel dies and why Alicia kills him, he becomes obsessed with this case, trying to figure out why Alicia was driven to this point of murder, where he felt like she didn't necessarily need to do that, or he wasn't expecting her to do that. He felt like there had to be some type of tragedy, some type of mental breakdown, something that he couldn't pinpoint or explain as to why she did this. So that was his whole reasoning and his whole purpose of coming to the forensic facility Grove and becoming her therapist, was more so not to help her, but to alleviate his own guilt for feeling like he had played some part in murdering this person, when ultimately he did. Like, what he did was not normal. Him going in and following not only his wife Kathy, but then following Gabriel and then following Alicia, all to, in the end, essentially kidnap her in her own home and tie her up, her and her husband, like causing just traumatic instances for everybody involved. His wife like just became this empty shell of a person, all because he was unable to deal with what was going on in his life, and he was unable to confront the problems that he was having. So really, even though Theo may not have pulled the trigger on Gabriel, he is the ultimate reason as to why he was murdered. So that was like the final pages, the final chapter. We find out from Alicia that Theo is actually the one who murders or tries to murder her, who makes it look like an attempted suicide by like shooting her in the hand with something. And y'all, I just couldn't believe that. Like, in her diary, she puts that she recognized his voice after, I think, the first or second meeting of who he was, something that he had said. She says on page 307, "That first time I met him in the therapy room, I wasn't sure. There was something familiar about him, but different. I recognized his eyes, not just the color, but the shape, and the same smell of cigarettes and smoky aftershave, and the way he formed words and the rhythm of his speech. But not the tone of his voice. It seemed different somehow. So I wasn't sure. But the next time we met, he gave himself away. He said the same words, the exact same phrase he'd used at the house, burned into my memory. I want to help you. I want to help you to see clearly." So the fact that she recognized him in that second meeting kind of spiraled her into wanting to dive deeper into what happened, wanting her to come out and talk about everything. But really, it wasn't for the sake of her speaking. It was because she knew that he had come back to taunt her. And she even says something in the book about, like, I think it's a cat or a cat and mouse or something like that. She says something about a creature taunting and tormenting. And so we see here that Theo is kind of doing that he's come back to taunt her, that he's come back to dig deeper into this wound, and is just doing it blatantly in front of her face. So for her, she's like, this is how I'm going to get back. Like, you should have just left well enough alone, but he couldn't. And because he's got kind of like an obsessive personality, he could not leave that alone. And therefore, here he is tormenting his pet, essentially. And so all that unravels, and Alicia is finishing up in her journal entry about what took place, what happened there, how everything unfolded, and how it came to be that she did, in fact, murder Gabriel, all because of Theo. And this journal entry is the last entry that she writes before she slips into the coma. And after that's all said and done, Theo is thinking of like that he got away with it and that he wants to cover his tracks. He's like, oh shoot, I need the journal that she has with all of the information, like who knows whose hands that could fall into. So he tries to go to her room and get this journal and this information, and it's nowhere to be found. Little does he know that Jean-Felix, one of the other characters, a close friend of Alicia, was already at the facility after he had heard that she slipped into a coma. And he came essentially for his own greed to collect her artwork. He had heard that she had some new paintings or something. And so he came to get her artwork, and Alicia left her journal for him in one of her artworks. So John Felix, before he sees Theo, scurries off with this journal. And I'm assuming, we can all assume that he reads it, turns it into the police, and the way that the story ends, this is why I give the book a 9, because the story was very good, very, very good up until this point. So the last chapter or the last couple of pages, a detective who Theo was already familiar with, I think he came to the facility for Christian for the attempted murder of Alicia. And Theo is just being like very, oh, I'm so helpful and yeah, like whatever you need. So the detective shows up to Theo's house and he's like, hey, mind if I come in? And Theo says, yeah, sure, come right in. Let's have tea. Very English thing to do. And they sit down and the detective is kind of talking about like what happened with Alicia and how weird things were. And he asked him about the journal and Theo just freezes. Like, a journal? And he's like, yeah, I got the journal and did you know that she wrote a last entry? And he says like, oh no, can I hear it? Knowing in a sense that he is going to be found out. So on 322, it states, Inspector Allen flicked through the pages to the end. He started reading from it aloud. He was scared of the sound of my voice. He grabbed my wrist and stuck a needle in my vein. I felt a sudden rising panic. I didn't know those words. I hadn't read that entry. It was the incriminating evidence I had been looking for, and it was in the wrong hands. Theo then says, I don't believe you happened to be in my neighborhood at all, Inspector. I handed him his tea. Ah, no, you're quite right. I thought it best not to announce the intention of my visit on the doorstep, but the fact is this puts things in a rather different light. So obviously he's found out. Obviously he knows that he's found out. Theo knows that he's found out. And this is why I don't really like the book. How it ends is this BS right here. Like, listen to this. I opened the window and reached out my hand. I caught a snowflake. I watched it disappear, vanish from my fingertip. I smiled, and I went to catch another one. Y'all, when I say I flipped through that book, like, okay, no, this can't be the end. Like, oh, there's something in the back. There's like 20 more pages left. There's things. There are obviously things that's gonna happen, because the way that this book ended is like your battery stopped working on your Bob. The way that this book ended, y'all, it just had me feeling some type of way, and I was just kind of like, what's happening? I even went and Googled like, oh, there must be a sequel. There must be another book where they tie in Theo, and where they go into his storyline and maybe give some backstory for him, which I think would be a really cool sequel to this book if they did decide to do one, which I have heard thrillers don't typically do sequels, but I think a really cool sequel to this book could be Theo Faber's storyline, that it goes along with him being caught and then ending up in the same facility that Felicia was in, and perhaps Diomedes or Indira, they become his therapist, trying to figure out, what went wrong in his life, and maybe give some backstory into why Kathy started cheating on him, or, go dive deeper into his life as a child. I think that would be really interesting, and just kind of see him go crazy and be this crazy person that he forced Alicia into being. I thought that would have been really cool. So I thought for sure after reading that last line of the book that there had to be a sequel. Like that's not even a cliffhanger to me. That's like you get to the top of a roller coaster and they just like, meh, you don't go back down, you don't go up, you don't go nowhere. Like, it's over. So yeah, for me, like the ending, it's obviously not bad. I think it's really good writing, especially for me to give this book a 9. It's really, really good. But yeah, just that last page, that last sentence, just the way that it ended, it just like made my skin crawl and just made me so mad. I literally flipped through the pages, like, this can't be it. It can't be done. It can't end like this. But it did. And I would say that is the only flaw that I personally felt about the book. Now, looking over this book, again, this is something really cool. We did not do this today. I had a lot to say about this book because I was really passionate about it, and I had a lot of opinions, and I just loved the characters. I loved the mystery. I loved the thrill of everything that was going on in this book. So for me personally today, I did not feel like I needed the book club conversation with the author in the back. This book club conversation is a little bit different because it's kind of giving perspective, I think, from the author. I didn't bother reading it. But if you guys as readers did read it, let me know in the comments if you think I should read it, if it's giving insight to the story, and maybe it gives good insight to the ending as to why it was so abruptly ended. I felt it was very abruptly ended. But there are questions in the back that are clearly already answered. A book club conversation with the author. I felt like I had a strong enough opinion about the book. Not that I don't care about what the author had to say, but I just so thoroughly enjoyed the book. It's like seeing how the sausage is made. Like, I appreciate the book for what it is, and I don't need it necessarily to be explained by the author. But as I said, if you guys did read the book conversation with the author, please leave a message in the comments and let me know if I should take a look or what your thoughts on it were. Did you feel like it gave you some real insight on the book? Let me know in the comments below. All right, well, that ends this week's episode of Bookworm Banter. Thank you guys so much for joining in. This was a long one. I was really excited about this book. Please, if you haven't read it, go out and read it. Even if you listen to this whole podcast and listen to all the spoilers, it is a book that is a really good read. It's a book that I feel like I would definitely read again. I highly recommend this book, guys. This is so, so good. So on that note, I'm going to talk about the book that we'll be reviewing next week. This is definitely different compared to the first 2 books that we've read. Obviously, Black Cake, that was a novel about a traditional Caribbean family that I wouldn't even know what to categorize that book, honestly, as far as like what genre of book it is. But so we've read Black Cake. This week we've read The Silent Patient, which is like a mystery thriller. And next week we're going to dive into a little bit of a lovey-dovey book. This book is called Happy Place. It is a book written by Emily Henry. It is a love story. I don't know if you're familiar with the author Emily Henry, but she has written several books. I'm not really sure what her other books are about, though if you're interested in that, obviously it's fiction, but this book is going to be like a love book, kind of a love story. I'm going to read you the description per usual. So if it sounds really interesting to you, pick up the book. If you like a good love story, pick the book up, read it. It's only 400 pages, so we'll be reviewing that next week. I'm going to read the description for you now. Harriet and Wynne have been the perfect couple since they met in college. They go together like salt and pepper, honey and tea, lobster and rolls. Except now, for reasons they're still not discussing, they don't. They broke up 5 months ago and still haven't told their best friends, which is how they find themselves sharing a bedroom at the main cottage that has been their friend group's yearly getaway for the last decade. Their annual respite from the world, where for one vibrant, blissful week they leave behind their daily lives, have copious amounts of cheese, wine, and seafood, and soak up the salty coastal air with the people who understand them most. Only this year, Harriet and Wynne are lying through their teeth while trying not to notice how desperately they still want each other, because the cottage is for sale, and this is the last week they'll all have together in this place. They can't stand to break their friends' hearts, and so they'll play their parts. Harriet will be the driven, surgical resident who never starts a fight, and Win will be the laid-back charmer who never lets the cracks show. It's a flawless plan. If you look at it from a great distance through a pair of sunscreen-smeared sunglasses. After years of being in love, how hard can it be to fake it for 1 week in front of those who know you best? So like I said, obviously this is a bit of a love story. I'm excited to read it. It's not my kind of book that I would typically read, but I'm very excited to read it. I love diving into new things. So if you guys want to come along with me on the journey of reading this new material, then please go out, purchase the book. Again, that name is The Happy Place, and we will see you again next week, guys. Thanks for joining. Bye.